Joining us live now is our friend, former international spokesman for the IDF and senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us from New York.
Thank you for having me, Michael. A pleasure.
And here we are 11 months on this weekend. I came back from Hirsch's Shiva this week and reflected on what strong people his parents are, John and Rachel, and all the hostage families. So I wondered if I could begin with a personal question. As somebody who has stood opposite the press on issues relating to these hostages for the last 11 months, what are your personal reflections on the news of the executed hostages?
Yeah, you're touching on what I think is the most difficult topic, issue, challenge, and moral mountain that we have to face and to overcome. I have, like so many other Israelis, a personal connection as well. There's a body of a former friend of mine who served in the IDF together, is being held by Hamas. I know that Asaf Hamami, he was killed on October the 7th, and his body is still being held. And of course, like so many other Israelis, I feel strongly personally connected to this issue. It's not only personal, but it's a matter of national pride, our reputation. The way that that the news hit me was that I was extremely saddened to hear about it. I was so frustrated by thinking that they endured 320 days of hell under earth in Hamas captivity, and then once they maybe had a chance of getting rescued by Israeli soldiers, Hamas executed them in cold blood and ended their suffering, but also ended the chances of them coming back home. That maybe was the most frustrating and the most difficult thing, because it felt as if we were close to saving them. And that is heartbreaking. I cannot imagine what the families feel. I don't want to even try to imagine what they're feeling now and what the families of 101 hostages are still feeling. I can only say that I understand them, I love them, I support them. I am with them in their quest to get their loved ones home. And the saddest thing is that we're dealing with extremely brutal terrorists that are happy to capitalize on each and every expression of emotion in Israel, and they're happy to use that for their leverage, and that's an extremely sad thing. But I support the families, and I hope and pray that we see the loved ones back home in Israel.
What do we know about where they were found?
Well, we know that they were held underground. We know that the location was within less than a kilometer of where the Israeli Bedouin man, Al-Kiyan, was held for the most part of his captivity. We know that it's one of the outlying neighborhoods of of Rafah, borderline Khan Yunis and Rafah. And we know that Israeli troops had been around that location for quite a few times. We also know that they were kept there at guard, and that their Hamas, the Hamas guards who were keeping them in prison there, executed them upon orders from Hamas, and then escaped the area as they heard IDF approaching.
And so does anything now change about the way the IDF conducts its military operations in Gaza? What should we expect as next stages?
Yeah, I think what changes is that Hamas is really looking at what's happening in Israel, the public outcry, the protests, and the political turmoil, and really benefiting from all of it. And I think strengthening their bargaining position. They're seeing the very genuine authentic outpouring of support for the hostage families in Israel, and they're translating it to political gain and advantage in the negotiations. What we're not seeing is significant pressure applied on Hamas, neither through Qatar, neither through the Egyptians or Turkey. They're basically being allowed to continue to hold Israeli hostages, and they're not paying a price for it. And what we're seeing on the ground is continued IDF activity, but what I've heard and seen is that the IDF is very, very extremely careful not to operate in areas where it thinks that there might be hostages in order not to trigger a similar event unknowingly, whereby Israeli troops will be maneuvering in an area and then Hamas will execute them out of fear of Israelis being close in order to rescue them.
And in the meantime, of course, the psychological terror from Hamas continues with the release of videotapes of the hostages. We should expect that to continue, I guess.
Definitely. We should expect them to continue, and we should expect them to continue to feed the political turnout in Israel. They want to see demonstrations. They want to see backlash. They want to see, they want to harbor, to use the sorrow and outpouring of emotions on Israeli streets. That is exactly what they want. And they will continue to drip feed Israelis with this poison with these rigged and edited videos of our 6 murdered hostages. They will continue to do that. They've already released 2, and I think that they will release the additional 4, and they will do it in parts, and they will make it the most excruciating and the most painful for the families in order to trigger maximum emotions in Israel in order to strengthen Hamas's hand in the negotiations.
And in the meantime, a lot of focus has turned to the Philadelphia corridor. Can you explain the significance of it? And would Israel be able to give up control on it for any period of time?
Yeah, Philadelphia is an important place, but the most important thing is what happens underground. And what I find missing from Israeli communications and the press briefing that the prime minister gave was the actual plan to stop the tunnels, because it's not enough to control the border itself above ground. What Israel needs to do, in my mind, is a serious engineering effort and basically to make it impossible for Hamas to dig any more tunnels and to use the ones that already exist. That, as far as I know, isn't in the making yet. And in my mind, that needs to happen. And that will apply a lot of pressure on everybody, on Hamas and on Hamas supporters in Cairo. And it will impress upon Hamas a real urgency, because they will see their assets being taken away. If you ask me a military question, is Philadelphia important? Unequivocally, yes. Are the tunnels absolutely critical for Hamas and its ability to rebuild itself the day after? Also, clearly, yes. Is it negotiable? I think it is negotiable, but that's more of a political and a strategic question. But I think that Israel, with its current military capabilities, can take into account the different events and be flexible. And with the ultimate, I think, what I think should be the number one goal of getting hostages back, see how it can be flexible and smart and cunning, but apply pressure on Hamas to get what we want, and that is the hostages. But very importantly, is to start digging and to start taking away the tunnels from Hamas. Unless we do that, sitting on top of Philadelphia has very little importance.
And of course, it would require Hamas to agree to a ceasefire deal, which up until now it has not. Let's turn our attention for a moment to northern Israel. We've seen consistent rocket attacks on the north of Israel. Are we closer to a full-scale war between Hezbollah and Israel?
Yeah, every day that goes by, and the world, led by the US and a few other countries, France, perhaps the UK and Germany, every day that goes by, and there's no diplomatic urgency to de escalate the situation, push Hezbollah away from the border, and allow 70,000 Israelis to return safely to their homes without the fear of an October 7 style attack against them. Every day that goes by brings us one day closer to an all-out escalation, which would be difficult for Israel, devastating for Lebanon, and could be really dangerous for the region. And I think that anybody that is talking about and giving lip service about preventing escalation should be really, really busy with preventing it through diplomacy and applying pressure on Hezbollah through the Lebanese state, through Iran, and through other backers in order to move Hezbollah back. Every day that they are close to the Israeli border is a day that we are pushed inevitably closer to an all-out confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah.
And it's a confrontation that the IDF is drilling for, of course. The IDF is also currently in the middle of a large-scale counter-terrorism operation in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. Can you explain the significance of this operation?
Well, it's a long overdue operation that so far has been very successful in attacking the infrastructure of various Palestinian terror organizations in Judea and Samaria. So far, it has focused on Tulkarem, Jenin, and Nablus to a lesser extent. And what it's basically doing is dealing with an imminent live threat of the use of vehicle bombs. In the military, we call it vehicle-borne IEDs, VBIEDs. We've seen 5 of them in the last 3 weeks dispatched towards Israeli targets. Fortunately, they haven't been successful, but the bottom line is that we're seeing the evolution of growing threats in Judea and Samaria against Israeli civilian and military targets. This operation that the IDF is doing now is the first and definitely not the least attempt to undermine the infrastructure of these organizations. But here, just like what we discussed with Philadelphia and Gaza, we have to address the root cause. The thing that allows Palestinian terrorist organizations to keep on projecting and killing Israelis and threatening to kill Israelis is the fact that we don't have a good control over the Israeli-Jordanian border. And it's an open, porous border. Weapons are getting in, and the Iranians are smuggling these weapons from Syria into Jordan and then into Judea and Samaria, specifically Samaria, which is the northern part of the West Bank. And that is really the fuel behind these attacks. And once we cut that line, then terrorist organizations, they might be very ideologically strong against Israel, but if they won't have weapons, they won't be able to execute significant attacks. And that is what Israel now is also starting to dismantle.
And finally, what's your message at this time to our Stand With Us audience about what they can do and the message they should be putting out to their contacts and networks right now?
Yeah, so I'm in New York because I'm starting a speaking tour with Stand With Us here on the Eastern Coast. We're going to be in New York, in Philadelphia, and in Florida. It's going to be great. We're going to meet lots of audiences and speak at different locations. I will tell you here the same message that I will speak with Stand With Us audiences here. It is that we still have our work cut out for us. There's a lot of enemies who are eager and dreaming about destroying Israel and killing Jews. We have to fight them. We have to be strong, resilient, and steadfast. We have to stay our course. We have to be united and focus on the most important things, and that is to defeat our enemies and get our people home and to deter possible enemies from attacking us. We have to do that by being strong in Israel, but also by working together with other democracies, other countries, first and foremost the US. And in order to do so, Israel needs the support of anybody that supports Israel in the US and around the world. And that is American Jews and good Americans who see that Israel is on the side of democracy and on the side of light. So my message is we still have to fight a long way. We need help to do it. Israel is strong, and at the end of this fight, we will win.
And I know that many people will be looking forward to seeing you in person. You can catch Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus on his tour with Stand With Us in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, and Southeast United States. You can look at standwithus.com for more details. In the meantime, thank you so much for your perspective and your insight today. Safe travels, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shabbat Tov.